I'll let you do the magic. Is that one on?
Switch it up.
No.
Okay. This is the NBR Review Committee meeting. It's May 10th. And I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting. And you have in front of you the agenda, the minutes from the last meeting, and the results of the public workshop that Michael Allen has provided for us. I got this copied today by the village clerk. I'd like to thank her very much for doing that, because I figured that was a more practical way of dealing with it than on a computer. So I'd like to start by asking if there were any changes that anybody wanted to make to the minutes of the last meeting. The minutes of the last meeting, which was April 25th, we combined notes on our site visit that took place on April 18th, and we didn't take minutes for that, but we recorded our impressions last time. And then we went over the slide presentation and made some suggested changes that Michael incorporated most of in his final version. So thank you for that. Do we have any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Good, I'll move to approve them.
Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so moving along to today's agenda, I'd like to start off by having sort of your impressions of how the workshop went. Michael Allen provided us with two versions of what?
Public comment?
Public comment?
Yeah, do you want to do public comment?
Oh, yeah. Is there any public comment? Sorry. Any comment from the public as to the public workshop or any other issues you'd like us to deal with?
Should I step up to the table?
Sure.
Please,
Come up
just
to
so
the
my grab
table.
on mic, so that we can have it. Just so the microphone, so you can pick up your words.
I just wanted to thank all of the efforts that brought that public workshop to being, and I thought it was well attended, attentively attended, and that the comments were both passionate and eloquent and really reflected an investment in this community that, had we not held the workshop, may not have come to our forefront. So thank you again, and I hope we do the best with this.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, so we'll conclude the public comment period. And can I have some help in the minutes? Because it's really hard. Only Michael Allen can both run a meeting and take minutes on the meeting simultaneously. I have never seen such great abilities displayed as he was able to in terms of taking really wonderful minutes.
Yes.
And giving us an understanding both of all the comments that were made, and then analyzing the visual preference survey, I think, in a very well done way. So, board members' impressions of the meeting or public workshop.
As we heard in public comment, I thought it was well attended. I thought it was well run. I was really interested to see some of the results in the report. It was nice to have data to support a lot of the feelings that I've had regarding how people felt about things like a fourth story. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I personally had was that we could potentially have different zoning in different parts of the NBR zone based on the parcel sizes and how they're, up against the historic Huguenot Street and the rail trail. I think that's very interesting because it would allow us, rather than restricting the entire zone because of certain properties, we can, not spot zoning, but appropriately, if we could have two different NBR zones, perhaps. I don't know, it's nice to know that we have other options other than finding one size fits all for the entire zone.
Yeah, I think that is something that came out very clearly, and we've probably come to that understanding in looking at the aerial photograph that we have worked from, is that the parcel sizes are very different. Actually, the character of the village is different as you move from south to north. The constraints are slightly different in different areas of the zone, and we're really not talking about that many parcels that are in maybe immediate potential of being developed. Some of the, I don't know if BOCES is going to move away in a hurry and redevelop that area. So there are some points in the zone that may be, established uses that may persist over time, whereas there's some other areas where it might change. Other impressions?
I kind of echoed what Dennis said. I think that I came away from that as well, is that the option of sort of thinking of the zone, of the whole district as being in different portions north of Stewart's is quite different from south. So that was my big takeaway.
And we'll have to see how we can address that. It's going to have to be, different from old school zoning where one size fits all. And I think that was, that's been an issue that has plagued this district most recently over the last two rezonings, but was always a potential problem because it has got so many different characteristics in a really fairly limited area.
Is that where form-based zoning?
Is that where form-based zoning could come in?
It could come in. Yeah, we're going to have to discuss with Michael what the best options are. But I think from the meeting and from the really thoughtful discussion that took place, it was a wonderful meeting in that the preference surveys kind of set the mood, and then people were able to discourse at length over their feelings, their passions, their insights, and it was obviously a very thoughtful process, and I think incredibly useful. It wasn't a meeting that broke down into different factions, and people were very respectful of each other's ideas and each other's opinions of different things. So I think it was very successful, and Michael Allen noted that in his report on what we did. So I think that was really useful for the community, and also to inform us in our work. Other impressions?
Prior to the public workshop, I had hoped that there'd be more representation in the slides for the north. I think I asked for that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't at the meeting, but it sounds like, was it more than just setbacks that were the issue with north versus south? Because the lot sizes, or is there more to it than just setbacks?
He eliminated most of the, when we went over the draft slides on our last meeting, the meeting before the public workshop, we had real problems with seeing the differences in the setbacks. So the slides that dealt with setback differences were reduced by, he got rid of a lot of them and had to explain really what the differences in setbacks were. No, the idea that the zone is different in the southern end versus the northern end, a couple of people commented that there weren't representative slides, but people realized that who lived in the area. And it wasn't just that it was a matter of the slides didn't represent it.
Right.
We've become aware of that as
Right.
we've done our site visit, and as people have made comments, that's pretty obvious that it's a different animal
Sure.
in the different areas.
But is it more than just setbacks that are affected by the fact that the lots are different? Is there other characteristics of the zoning
Yeah,
that would
because,
necessitate different zoning districts? Because I think setbacks can easily be accommodating based on lot size. Like you could have a minimum, but if your lot is bigger, it could be a percentage that you increase based on lot depth or width.
right,
To treat big lots versus little lots and still keep in one zone. Because I think if you try to create two zones, it's going to make this process a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
But I think that's why I'm asking, is it more than just setbacks related to lot sizes?
I think
That
it
was
might
the
be a
issue.
bit more than setbacks, because building height is also
Building
an
height,
issue.
Sure.
Because if you're having a gradual transition, as was suggested, that we look at areas of the village where it goes from 2 to 3 stories, that, you can mimic that kind of transition. So then you'd have a more gradual
Sure.
height increase, but whether that can be done with form-based zoning, I'm not sure.
Some of the other comments, am I being recognized?
Sure. Public comments.
Yeah, some of the other comments that I recall to address what you're asking had to do with the proximity to the rail trail, parking, and lighting, 24-hour lighting, which would,
Right.
of course, be a really important aspect to safety and liability.
Those might be addressed in setbacks, but it's not just setbacks
Yeah.
from Route 32. It's setbacks also from the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail, and issues particularly to do with noise, lighting, and glare, as well as landscaping, because typically, if you have an opportunity to put parking in the rear of the building, it's less of an impact. But in this case, it's a bigger, different impact, because the rail trail is the western border of the NBR zone. So in many ways, this is a very complex,
Sure.
small
almost
zone
like you have
with
two
a lot of
front-
issues.
You have 2 front yards.
Right, I always like parking on the side anyway, but.
Yeah. Did you have a comment there?
It's okay.
It's okay, all right.
I would add one point on setback. On setbacks, from the road from 32, it enables the route to have a bike route that is separated from the roadway and separated from parking. So the current plan or the newer plan from Zero Place actually begins to address that and provide something that really is unique for our community. It exists in many other parts of the country, but the idea of having sidewalk, a bike lane, and then parking really sort of sets a real feel for it, makes it a real gateway. You notice something's different right away when you're coming from the north, and hopefully that'll be something that goes into our planning moving forward. Thanks.
And that is, that scenario with parked cars, bike lane, and then sidewalk is one that's been adopted, in a lot of the more innovative communities that deal with bike and pedestrian issues.
I would point out, though, that in those same areas, in the same situations, often the setback is extremely reduced or is at 0, where the buildings are right up against the sidewalk, because of the amount of space that you're taking to do those different transitions.
Right.
To the building front for you. So usually the building's fronts are right up there. And normally a setback is greater if you're trying to distance the building from the roadway, which you don't have to do as much if it's landscaped and has the bike lanes and things like that.
Yeah, I think some other people noted with minimal setbacks, as currently exist in NBR zone, you can have 0 setback. That's a problem at intersections because of being able to see, incoming traffic. So that's another issue that needs to be addressed, particularly where you're dealing with a building that's on a road with an intersection coming into it.
I have looked into that more. The current zoning does have corner lot clearances, and basically it's a 30-foot by 30-foot triangle area that you can't be more than 3 feet high when you're a corner lot.
Can you explain that again?
So when you're a corner lot, you have 2 lot lines that are on the street. So those 2 lot lines, you have to draw an imaginary triangle from your corner, 30 feet along one street, 30 feet along another street. Those are your 2 legs of the triangle, and then you have your hypotenuse, or your, whatever that part is.
As far as the footprint.
And then that creates this triangle, 30-foot, 30-foot triangle,
Actually,
that you can't build anything higher than a certain.
in one of the earlier Zero Place site plans, they actually show that triangle. And that was actually one of my comments, was that the sculpture area that he was talking about doing interfered with that site triangle. So that is something that is already in the ordinance.
Yeah, I don't think it's specific to any district. It's corner lots.
Okay, all right, so it applies to
For
the
intersection.
whole village.
One of the things that it doesn't address though,
3 feet?
3 or 4 feet, and it doesn't include overhangs or cornices or that kind of thing.
it's intended so you can see over it while seated in your vehicle. The other thing that I think came up quite a bit is not only the transitional nature of the parcel size and closeness to the rail trail, but also of the speed of vehicles. And how do you accommodate that into a single district, basically? One streetscape for, we go from, this covers all the way from 40 down to 30. And beyond that, it's people are cranking it up. So how do you suddenly accommodate that from regular 32 traffic into a streetscape that you're now encouraging people to walk, bike, cross?
Back to the corner clearances, if you allow on-street parking, it kind of makes the whole thing moot. Because you can have a SUV parked there and you can't see anything. So maybe you don't need the corner clearances when you have on-street parking. But then, now do you have signal intersections? How do you handle it at that point?
Usually we have, you have the sign, no parking closer than here to the corner.
Okay.
And that's supposed to be
So
outside
that's the
the
first
sight
30 feet
lines.
then?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's why. So you don't allow parking in that.
You almost
same-
need it 40 plus feet because you have the width of the vehicle, another 10 feet.
You
Usually it's only 10 or 20 feet, right? 20 feet from the intersection?
I think so, but you're also gonna have a crosswalk there that's gonna be some space, and then you have no parking zone, and then that's how you get outside that.
Okay, good.
And the bike lane too, though,
Then you
so,
got
you are talking about cars being a lot farther out.
Sure.
So, but there's also more things that could be in the way, and we really have to consider that at some of these intersections, especially, the Henry Du Bois, 32. I like to say, well,
Is that how he pronounced his name?
I know.
It's the boys.
And then Mulberry.
Yeah.
I still call it Mulberry, as the regional trail link.
Sure.
So accommodating that through an increasing traffic level and dealing with people's expectations, making sure the pedestrians' expectations are the same as the driver's expectations as to speed, number of crossings, number of hazards they have to look out for.
Okay, I'm going to send this report on to the mayor and the planning board. I wanted you guys to have a chance to look it over. So that's the next step. But I would like us to consider the main findings that we want to stress. And in some places, Representative Michael Allen has already done that. So if we could look at this document and figure out the things that are most important.
Are we writing a summary, or is Dean writing a summary?
The next thing that Deanna's gonna do, this is for you. If we go back to the memo where they revised the original work plan, because the original work plan was for a bigger process, we're hoping that the second part of the work plan is funded through the Ulster County Transportation Council, UPWP, Northern New Paltz study. I hope that's moving forward. But we had 3 tasks. The first one was we made some recommendations in what was not working with our current code. The second task was the public workshop, which is what the report is about. And the third task will be for BHAN to develop design-based recommendations. BHAN will consider and recommend an approach appropriate for the corridor and for administration by the village, e.g. design guidelines, form-based code. And that will be, a recommended approach will be outlined in a memo for consideration by the advisory committee. So I'm thinking we need to have some input into that, if you are comfortable with that, because even though Michael's done a really good job of summarizing everything, I think there are key issues that we should highlight in our next communication with him. I don't know if we'll get to meet with him in person, but I've been in communication by email and phone through this process, so I anticipate that will continue. So in the beginning of this really fat 44-page document, there's a summary of the public comments that goes through page 12 or 13. I renumbered the pages, so I included the first page, so they're slightly different from the numbers on the pages. And then there's the addendum where all of the different slides are included so that we have an idea of which things the community was most in favor of in that visual preference survey. But that's not the be-all and end-all of what we're trying to achieve here. So if you look at pages 11 or 12 with my numbering and 12 or 13 with my numbering, you'll see that he has a summary of the visual preference outcomes. So I was thinking that that would be something we should look at, right? That's, because trying to digest it all at once is a little difficult. But I think some of the comments you've already made have highlighted the things that we need to address. So let's take a look at my number 12 on Michael's number 11.
11 of 12.
Can you find that? It says visual preference survey results. And by the way, I did note to everyone there was a very useful article that Kingston Freeman put out about the meeting, and I would like us to submit something to the New Paltz Times, which was not there, so that the community who didn't get that might be aware that the meeting went on and what happened. So if I can get your feeling on whether we should do that.
The survey results might be newsworthy.
Okay, not in toto. We're going to have to decide what we think is a highlight.
Well, I think,
Well, even just these 2 pages.
yeah, just to share, because, especially given that at least half of the group agreed on most of these answers, it is nice to be able to just get that information out there. That way, if anyone disagrees with that, it gives them a chance to get back in front of us and maybe,
Okay.
you know, and we get additional feedback.
So do you think that should be done in a letter to the editor? Those are usually not so edited as the other things, but,
Well, we just send these couple pages to the editor and say, you know, do you find this newsworthy? Do you think you could write an article about it? Happy to answer questions.
okay, we could do that.
We could do a press release, but those are usually shorter and less, you know, shorter than articles.
Right.
We could throw a press release, say, do you want to take this and make it into an article? You know.
I think maybe better served, because it is just sort of one component of what we did. But we really are leaning towards this as that was the most, you know, inputted. So perhaps we need to do a press release on this. And I'd be willing to work on something with you if you want to. But we can also include, you know, these pages.
Yeah,
as
I'd be,
well.
that would
I
be
think
very
a little
helpful.
guidance is necessary, because if we just send this, it
Yeah.
becomes a big
No, I
bear
think
to
that's a
handle.
good idea.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah,
I'd certainly support you doing that.
well, thank you.
And I
But
really
Joe and I-
enjoy
Yes, yes.
you helping me with that.
Yeah, okay, no, I think that would better serve our needs, and we should probably get it done
Yeah.
ASAP,
like
Yeah.
tomorrow.
okay?
And you can always start it with, you know, wish we would have seen your reporter there, but, you know.
Yeah,
Yes.
There you go.
okay. If you want to, we can
Yeah, I think we
That
should
would
do
be
that.
great.
work on this together. Yeah.
Okay,
What I've heard from reporters, they usually write their articles on Friday and Saturday. So
Yeah, that's what
just as a
I
heads
would
up.
think. If we got
Yeah, I
a
think-
draft together, maybe we could circulate it on our committee members, see if there's anything.
I know that the sort of deadline for stuff to the New Paltz Times is Friday.
At 3:30.
Yeah,
Well, if you'd like to circulate, that would be great, but I would be comfortable with whatever you guys can.
Okay.
They'll take press releases up till Monday, but if you get them late, they go at the back of the, you know,
Right.
that pages.
yeah, I think some of it's a little arbitrary, but there you go. They have the right to be that. Okay, so let's have a look at these findings and see if there are some we want to really highlight. You'll note that there were 72 completed surveys and 5 partial surveys. Some people had to leave, and some people maybe didn't want to complete them all, but I think at some point we were close to 80 in there. I know we put out 100 chairs, so not all of them were occupied, but it was a really good turnout.
Well, when I read this, the headline was 3 stories. I don't know how people felt.
Yeah.
I think that was clearly the feeling in the room. I think I still would like to hear some kind of a justification or a reason for it being more than 3. And I don't think we have that yet. That may be one thing that we still, if we need to look at, should search out. But I've talked to a couple of people and really haven't gotten a clear answer of why that decision was made in the first place. And I think it is one of the things that the visual survey was very good at representing, and better than other things. And I thought it was clear. So I would support that.
Support what?
That being one of the major
Cap.
findings, 3 stories,
3 stories.
or recommendations.
Yeah, I've always felt that way with village zoning. It's always been capped at 3 stories. My understanding, and that's how you maintain that village feel. I've been thinking 4 stories could work on some of these lots with a larger setback or some sort of terracing, so there's not so much of an effect. Because I do believe more stories, the better in certain situations when it can work. You know, just from an efficiency, not necessarily good, just it makes more sense to go up instead of spread out in some situations. And that may be where the south versus north comes in, or if you have a minimum lot size, 4 stories could work. I don't know how one could technically draft that and how you come up with that threshold, but certainly over by Agway, those are pretty deep and large lots. Whether they're even buildable in the first place because of the condition of them, I don't know, but I could see 4 stories working there when it's not right on the road, and it's set back, you have a larger lot. But is it even worth trying to identify and only allow that on certain size lots is, I think, a question. But
And with
I'm
different
not opposed-
setbacks?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to 4, I thought about it, and I've always felt 3 stories is how you keep and maintain village character. You know, and a lot of zoning has to do with character. We're trying to preserve a character. And I've always had that mindset, 3 stories is how you do that. In this zoning district, you do have some large lots on the north end that I think maybe could support a 4th story. But I don't know if that's it just complicates things, makes it more difficult with trying to create a zoning district, one zoning district, which I think we really should focus on. Creating one zoning district and not separating them, I think that.
Okay.
Yeah, just to clarify what I said earlier, I don't necessarily mean we have to have 2 districts. You know,
Right.
how we get there is not important, but being able to consider, because like the Agway property is specifically the one that I'm thinking of, could probably support
Right.
4 stories because it's large enough, because it could have adequate parking that
Right.
some of the other spots wouldn't
And I-
have. It's just how do we get there? And Michael Allen's going to come back and give us recommendations on how to codify these things. So I really feel we're best served if we come up with what is the ideal and then let him tell us how to get there.
Right.
You know,
I would say that I've done a lot of studying of zoning over time and looked at the typical height for villages is always 35 feet. I mean, even in more modern ordinances, and that heights above that, particularly like 50 feet, are confined to cities, and they're mostly industrial buildings that are being refurbished in order to accommodate apartments. So it really does kind of move towards a total change in village character if you then introduce 4-story buildings in a community that has been capped mostly at 35 feet or 3 to 3.5 stories, and it will mean that those buildings stand out against the village streetscape, landscape in a very, different way. And whether that's a good solution for adding residences is one that I think is a big issue.
I think it's a big issue too.
It's a really big issue. And then how those residences will be inhabited is an even bigger issue, because there's quite a lot of myths going around in terms of particularly student housing in the village that need to be exploded. And one of those is that students do not have cars and they walk places. This is totally untrue. They do not walk, they drive very short distances, and they have a lot of cars. And that can be seen in village areas where students are in what used to be single-family homes, and there are more and more cars and bigger driveways and parking areas that are now attached to them because all of the students have cars. And also that they don't have that much money, and a lot of the students who go here may not have much money, but they may have parental input that allows them to afford things. So when you talk about price points obviating students living in particular places, we really need to watch that those myths are exploded, because they just ain't true.
Can I
So,
pick up a little bit on your point about residences and capacity? Residences and capacities, maybe we could task Michael or Aspian, if they could sort of do an estimation when you lower your height to 3 stories, what that means in terms of how many people are going to be able to live in that zone. But if you've raised it to 4, what is that number going to be? Because I think that's an important aspect of this. How many people are going to be living in this zone? 3 stories is going to give you X.
Right.
4 stories giving X.
Well, we
plus-
really have needed a build-out analysis
Well-
ever since the rezoning was done in 2015.
Right.
And I'm not sure if one was done in 2013 either. So there was no build-out analysis of exactly what that increase in height and increase in density would mean for the community as a whole, or the infrastructure needs, or the impact that would have on a lot of the community services. It may be that that little extra piece might overwhelm some of our infrastructure, and you can't build part of a sewage treatment plant. You can't build part of a water filtration plant. So when you get kicked up to that next input, it's a burden on the whole community.
That's right.
And really, zoning is done in order to safeguard the health, safety, and welfare of the community, rather than addressing the needs of future residents. So, all of these are really complicated issues that come together in this discussion.
Right.
The short and the long, trying to determine how difficult it would be to do really a building analysis. Because of the complex existing, it's difficult to look at. You could look at a simple max based on average acreage, but that number is probably going to estimate way high. But there aren't that many environmental constraints. Now, my understanding is some of the properties down past Agway.
North of Agway, you mean?
North of Agway.
There are
At
severe
one
water
point-
issues and wetland issues.
Well, and that's the question is, do they still qualify as wetlands? And
That's true.
They were in the
And
National
also, there's
Wetland
no
Reservoir.
infrastructure north of Tributary 13 to accommodate, public water and sewer there, so.
But if they're federal wetlands, you can, especially with the value of potential density that you'd be allowed,
Right,
you can buy other property and
Right.
2-for-1 mitigate
mm-hmm,
on federal wetlands. So it doesn't mean that it can't be developed, especially if it's going to be developed on fairly substantial cost.
so, even
So-
trying to do an estimation of 3 versus 4 stories is really hard
Yeah.
in terms of how many residents it would generate because of, these factors which would make more or less of the property be able to be developed, or properties be able to be developed.
But I think it's worth taking
I think it's worth taking a look, just as an estimation, just, if it's a guess. that
it's
this is-
some basic GIS.
Because we have all these other needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not just the structures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, just a simple, 3 stories, first story is gonna be commercial, so you get 2 stories of residential, 4 stories, you get 3, so essentially you're getting 50% more, whatever number you come up with 3 stories. So they are getting a substantial increase,
I think
if everything else
Wait a
is the
minute,
same.
if you've got,
Yeah, the thing-
no, if you've got bottom commercial and 2 residential
Right,
versus 3 residential,
right, you're getting
That's-
50% more.
Right.
Yeah,
50%.
50%.
no, you're not getting 50% more. It's 1 out of 3, it's 33% more.
Well, that's okay.
Well, it depends if you're
Which way you
subtracting or
calculate it,
adding. If you're
yeah.
adding, it's 50%, if you're subtracting, it's 33%.
Okay,
And
Right,
just,
but you're getting 50% more, right?
Because an
but is
additional
somebody
story is
building a
half of a
10-foot
2-story
apartment, or are
building.
they, each lot could have very different size residences, so
Well, and
it's
this
really
is true,
hard
too.
to
But
estimate.
it's also the way that the ordinance is written. you have to look at, all right, what is the limiting factor here? I think with zoning, zero place, we've discovered the limiting factor is probably parking.
Yeah.
So when you're doing your calculations, you're not just doing a straight calculate of what I can fit within an 85% building envelope. It's parking calcs. And then it's playing with the stories and the mix in order to get your parking.
Does the district allow parking garages? Just gonna throw that out there.
Allows parking underneath
Underneath the
the
first
building.
story?
Yeah.
Because the first story has to be commercial, obviously. The ground.
In the front,
Just in the front.
only in the front,
Joe, I have
because that's
a
what they're doing.
question.
So,
My question is, are we going to be making our recommendations based on the public comments? Because clearly the public comments is overwhelmingly, they're saying 3 stories.
Right,
Or are we
exactly.
making it based on our own personal opinions or?
I think what we're doing at the moment is thinking about more than just,
Okay.
a simple number. We're thinking about the different constraints that are involved in trying to decide what is the best possible option for this zone. But yeah, the public has spoken and they've said 3 stories. So that should inform, some of our recommendations.
Yeah, I was going to respond to what Floyd originally said about the Ackway lot and stuff, but I found the conversation so fascinating I didn't want to interrupt it. So if we've gone to the public and have heard an overwhelming support for 3 stories, I think that should temper any consideration. I don't think we should be blindly following, the survey results, but I think that should really be a loud voice for, giving consideration to 3 stories only. If we're going to have 2 zones, that makes it a little easier to break it up, but I don't think 2 zones is going to be very easy to pull off. But I agree with you saying, I bet that way site could support 4 stories.
I mean, that's my personal belief, and I certainly would weigh the public comments more than my personal feelings. And my personal feelings have always been, since I've gotten involved with zoning here in the village, 3 stories is there for a reason, and 3 stories is why we are a village. And that's clearly what has guided us to stay as a village, is that constraint. I mean, other than the college, which you have a couple of 10-story buildings, but that's the streetscape we have, that's the character we have. And it's because of the 3 stories, I think, is why we have that character and why change that, if that's what we want to maintain. Can we get 4 stories to work? If you're doing 4 stories, why not do 5 or 6? I mean, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
You draw the line at 3 stories, and that's what they did. And that's why we are the way we are, probably, here in the village.
And people seem to like it.
Yeah.
And it's not just the village of New Paltz, it's the
No,
village
it's statewide, nationwide, and that's common for villages, I certainly.
Yeah. Okay.
Just a point of clarification, does paid parking constitute commercial? If it was down the ground floor, you had a paid parking lot, that would meet
I would
the
think that would
obligations
count
for
as
zoning?
commercial.
paid parking as retail? No, we're talking
It has
about
to be-
talking about the use of the building,
Right,
not,
and then
not
when
the
you get
lot
paid parking, no,
itself.
no, I'm saying, if you use the first floor as a parking garage, paid parking, it would be sort of by definition retail, because it's individuals paying for
Would
parking.
be commercial, right?
It would be commercial, right?
So you're saying you may have found a loophole?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an appropriate loophole, you don't have to look at
Yeah.
parked cars.
I
And
So now you have-
meets the need.
I think retail, by definition, is not parking.
But I don't think
Okay,
it's-
but if you look back at the beginning of our process here, we shared the Lloyd Gateway District, and that has an allowance for parking within the buildings as part of, a commercial use. Just not in the front, but on higher floors or on the back. But the front would be, the bottom floor of the front would be a commercial or retail activity.
And there is a list of approved types of businesses as part of the zoning. I don't recall if parking decks are on there or not, but there is a list of There is not a list.
I think that was the original version that got replaced by what got passed.
Red line.
And that was part of the design standards that came out.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Okay, I did bring the height use, but not the village uses, so one could look that up. But we're kind of getting diverted from
Yes, we are.
where we were originally going. So, 3 stories, flat roofs. Now, in terms of flat roofs, I know one of the arguments for that is the increased possibility of solar. But Floyd, I believe you said that you could use roof treatments that allowed for solar, but also were not necessarily totally flat on the edges. Was that true? Or am I having a brain
I don't know if I got into
mistake?
that with you. There's certainly buildings like Alfondre's building on Main Street. It's not flat, although from the road it's flat,
Right,
because that's the southern exposure.
But
if you did
it's
a
a
gable- If you did a gabled roof, you're really limiting yourself to half the roof. If you're turning it perpendicular to the south, then you really put yourself out. Like Rock and Snow, they have them just on the ridge, which is really not getting anything. But, I mean, all Main Street is flat roof. Or, I shouldn't say that. A lot of them have
but
that
they've
look.
got parapets in front of them.
Right, right.
So you don't notice it being a flat roof.
Sure.
Because if you have a parapet, you can hide the flat roof behind it, but say the Main Street 1880s, 1890s building, they're flat behind that parapet, but the parapet gives it visual interest, and it also ties it in with the 19th century streetscape that is typical of our Main Street.
Did any of our slides include parapets?
I don't think they well, yeah, some did, but it wasn't a focus on
Yeah,
parapets.
essentially, it's flat and blocky more so than a gable.
Right,
Yeah,
I don't recall seeing,
No, he didn't have the tools to be able to create parapets and the visual preferences. What we were just dealing with building size. There was some in those initial side-by-side comparisons, but we weren't really focusing on parapets.
Sure.
One of the difficulties that emerged, as we knew from our pre-analysis, is that when you're looking at a couple of buildings, it's hard to focus on just like the sidewalk when you're looking at the whole building. And so you're looking at the architectural style rather than necessarily, the arrangement between the building and the street or the sidewalk. So that always complicates visual surveys.
I think number 2 gets more into architectural or design standards, which could be a component of the code for sure,
But it's
I mean,
not
it's
a main
matter-
thing,
I don't
right?
think it's a
Yeah,
main thing, it's a matter of personal taste.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about number 3? I'm going to number these so that we can decide what we want to focus on. Number 3, taller buildings need to be in proportion with lot size, setback, and mass of the building. I think that makes perfect sense.
Although if we do say that we cap at 3 stories, to me, I don't know if it makes a difference to me if you're right at the street or if you're 30 feet back, other than the issues at intersections.
You could still deal with, you can have 3 stories, but you can have more visual interest by having facade variation. So maybe that addresses that.
I have one quick interjection here. Is zero place a factor at all in sort of considering this? Because if it's currently slated for 4 stories, is that something?
Yeah, zero place is exempted from any new things we come up with
Yeah,
because
it'd be
it was already
grandfathered
in
for
the
any
process.
Right,
So
is
it's
there thought about-
grandfathered.
Is there a thought about then melding in that portion of the community?
We don't know whether we're at the final stage with zero place yet. It still has to go through site plan review.
Right,
It's only sort of in the middle of its gestation period.
right.
So we're looking at the community's input here and what they're interested in seeing in the community. So I think that should motivate what we're talking about rather than something that is in process.
I would also say that zero place is kind of in a strange place in the district itself, in that it's up against the stream and has a little green area in between it and the stream. And then directly on the other side of it, it's got mulberry. So it's really in almost like a block of its own as far as the continuation of the whole NBR district.
Right.
Yeah, it's not going to meld in with anything, because even if you go across the street, the former Napa building's not big enough to support 4 stories, like not even close. So there's really nowhere to
Neither
meld
the
in.
other one's closer. Plus, then the further you go that way, the more impact on the historic district.
Right.
Right, so then.
And the other buildings,
Not to say that it's not gonna meld, I mean, stories, I don't just mean stories though necessarily.
As far
It's
as,
part of it, I mean, 3 stories, you could have it go 3 stories, 4 stories, and then 3 stories. It seems like it could still meld, but,
Yeah, there's just nothing visually that's going to be next to it to really meld with.
right, it's, well, yeah, being on the corner.
yeah,
Okay.
and then having the stream on the other side.
But essentially, should we even be thinking about zero place? Is it outside of purview, or should we be thinking of it?
We can certainly we can think about it. I
But
mean,
it's outside
anything that we do
our-
is not going to impact it.
Right,
right,
right, the planning board has that control. This
Exactly.
committee is looking at the district as a whole.
right. And involving public input, because when they did the 2015 rezoning, there was no opportunity really for broad public hearings and broad public input, and that's what we're trying to address right now, because that was a flaw in the process that we didn't get to address earlier, and I think we're doing that now. It's like a do-over.
Let's hope.
Yes, let's hope.
Definitely.
Okay, at least we have the opportunity to look at this issue and in a deeper way and try and figure out what we might want to do, rather than having things built and then say, oh, that's not what we wanted. Okay, so what do you think about 3? Not so important?
No, I
Number 1.
I don't know. The way I look at 3 is it's kind of like, obviously. You know,
Yeah.
taller buildings are obviously going to have to be in proportion to lot size and setback, because that's the way the requirements are written. So
Yeah,
there's just more floor space in a taller building, so you're going to have more parking, you're going to have more of all the required amenities. So
Well, sure. You know, also, what is meant by taller buildings? Are we referring to taller buildings at 3 stories, or are we referring to buildings just at 3 stories?
Yeah, that was my question too.
Yeah, I mean, taller buildings can mean 2-story buildings, right?
yeah, so I would take it as 3 stories, and I would take it
Are
as.
we assuming that that's what?
Well, I would think 2-story buildings need to be in proportion as well as 3-story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, actually,
Shorter
if
and
you,
taller buildings need to be in.
Basically,
so everything
smaller
needs to
the
be in
lot,
proportion.
smaller.
It's not
Right.
it's not a.
okay,
Number 1 is very
Not a
clear,
cube.
standing alone.
Yeah.
Number 3 to it, it's confused.
That's right.
and the
Right,
second half
okay.
of number 3 makes no sense to me, and mass of the building, I don't understand where that falls into any of this.
right.
Because are you saying taller buildings need to be in proportion with the mass of the building? Because it's almost like it's just kind of tacked on there at the end, in mass.
Yeah. Okay, so
I think-
3 is
yeah, I don't
confusing.
think we need to read these too literally, because
Right,
I
it's
think
just,
they're trying to,
Yeah.
I think they kind of took the comments and made.
Sure,
minor
jerking
edits.
them together,
yeah. But at least 50% of the group agreed on the same answer, and this is some of the most frequent comments.
I think there was a general concern about mass of the buildings.
Yes, sure.
Being probably too large for the lot size.
Okay, dormers are visually appealing, break up roof line and add interest. But then I don't understand what the last sentence means. With dormers, shorter buildings are better?
yeah, it doesn't-
I'm not
doesn't
sure
work
about
with me.
that.
I don't think those things actually were in the same comment slot.
Maybe dormers, if you had a 3rd story and it had dormers, it would make the building appear to be smaller, because it would look like a 2-story building with a roof.
Yeah,
Maybe that was the intent.
I think that's probably what the writer implied.
I think that's typically why you do it.
It's
You
the way to
make
cheat
that-
in on an extra floor.
Right.
basically.
The largest further setback with landscaping is the most desired.
See, this is one of those places
That's
where I
one of
kind of
those-
feel like we shouldn't just blindly follow
Right.
everything that we get,
Yeah.
because then everything's gonna be right up against the rail trail. Like,
Yeah.
we kind of need to balance the two different faces, as you put it earlier.
Yeah.
Unless we
One
say,
thing-
something about the largest furthest setback from the rail trail and the street.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
a 5-foot section where you
Among
can
those-
build in the middle of
Is
the
there a way
road.
you could treat the bigger lots differently in the way you state that? So that could you say, for the bigger lots, we'd find some way to incentivize green space towards the rail trail and still maintain some sort of setback, so that, and that would help maybe control the density of the whole, like, because if you think of those whole lots, you could fit a lot of people on those lots theoretically, but what if you said that general footprint that's down at the southern end, could you kind of maintain that and then keep it green towards the back? It's just a thought.
Yeah, these are the things we're gonna ask Michael Allen if we can finesse this.
Well, I think too, you do look at a real difference between providing an attractive streetscape in where you have retail with windows on the streetscape
Yeah.
and, you know, for lack of a better word, a more larger block-like campus-type building that you're trying to set in the middle of as much green space as you possibly can, so the shadow doesn't fall off the lot. So, yeah, I think the lessons on setbacks are that, you know, you have to deal with both sides. You have to deal with the rail trail as well as the street. And then it's almost, you have to make a decision as to how much you're gonna invest in your streetscape and how far down is your streetscape gonna go. Because you can't have a streetscape like that in a 40-mile-an-hour zone. That's stupid. You can't do it. So either you have to slow traffic all the way out to the end of the corridor and try and provide a continuous streetscape which provides the bicycle pedestrian things the NBR supposedly is looking for.
Yeah.
Or, you know, if you're deciding that maybe the end of the corridor gets less of the streetscape, it still has a sidewalk to get to BOCES, still has the bike lane. But at that end, we're gonna have larger buildings. They're not gonna be as related to the street. They're gonna be further back off the street, and they're gonna be further back off the rail trail.
Why are they further back up the street?
Well, just because we're expecting the speed to increase, we don't think that end is as pedestrian oriented as the other end.
Right, I guess it depends on how far north you go.
It depends on how far, yeah, I'm talking about, yeah,
Right
down
next
near
to
BOCES.
BOCES.
Right, so, but so
Where
how
it's
you-
still
right.
40 miles an hour.
Again, we'll have to look, we really have to look at that, I think, as
Yeah.
to,
It goes to 30 at the village line, right?
No,
It
no,
goes-
it's 40 within the village, at BOCES.
Isn't that,
Yeah.
isn't village ordinance, you can't be above
No,
50?
it's there's the only place. I
No,
can-
30 doesn't start until quite a bit
I
into
should
the
know,
village.
because I drive it all the
Yeah.
time.
30 Stewart's, I think.
you're right.
Yeah,
30 is
Yeah,
too,
right, yeah, right before Stewart's, on the
Really?
north side.
No,
of
it's
Stewart's.
further north than that.
Yeah.
I thought it was up by
It's by
Bonnie.
Sunset Ridge
I
somewhere.
always hit the gas at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
old town hall,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, like, yeah.
Before I see the 40 sign.
I think it is a car wash, actually.
yeah, I think it's the car
Well,
wash.
anyway,
One market.
Yeah, right in there.
I, as a resident of
The gas
that portion of the
station.
village, wouldn't mind seeing it go to 30. I could say that myself.
Well, I think if you're gonna do the streetscape, then you're gonna make an application to go to.
Yeah, I would think
Yeah.
so too. And so that's
Also,
why,
I
so
mean,
that's why the setback thing jumped.
Well, and
to
how
me.
do you have street parking at 40? You're gonna try to
Right.
parallel park with 40-mile-an-hour traffic going?
Yeah, I don't know, I don't think you need street parking as much anymore, so because of the bigger lots, right?
Well, and that's the question is, how long are we proposing the streetscape continues?
Yeah,
And then that will relate as to how much the setback
Right.
should be.
so how does that work as far as making a single zone?
Well, it may be that trip 13 kind of bifurcates the zone anyway.
Or it could be a percentage of the depth of the water setback instead of
Instead
the
of
actual
fixed
number.
number.
Right, or it could be a minimum number, and then you get more latitude, the planning board gets more latitude
Yeah.
as the lot gets deeper, not the
Yeah.
applicant.
The other thing you can do is you can relate zoning ordinances basically to your planning effort. So if the second part of this is more of a transportation study and the discussion of what the 32 corridor will look like and how it's going to be structured, then you basically adopt whatever that plan is as part with the ordinance and saying you have to do what that says. So if the plan has a change in the streetscape, which would equal maybe a different setback at the one end, then that would be acceptable under a common ordinance because you actually are laying out. See, that's more what like a form-based zone is supposed to be, where you're actually laying out what you want on in the different areas.
Well, I ask myself, what are we trying to achieve with the front setback? What is the front setback? What is the front setback giving us? I think what it does is it takes away from our back setback. And to me, I don't mind the front setback being next to nothing. Especially if you're trying to create a streetscape.
Yeah, and that's, I said that strongly. That's the reason I joined the committee was the idea of pedestrian, bike, friendly community for me and my children is overwhelmingly positive. And so I think a lot of people share that, at least in my neighborhood and the neighborhoods surrounding me. So that's a priority, certainly, I would think.
I feel setback becomes more important when you go higher than 3 stories. Like I think the width of the road and the height of the building still doesn't look like a cavern when you're at 3 stories. So I'm comfortable with very small setbacks in the front if we're capping the height at 3 stories. If you're going 4 stories, that's when I think you're creating more of a canyon, or where you're kind of feeling more encroached by the building. Maybe that's why you then create front setback. You're protecting that feel. But I think when you're at 3 stories, the height of the building, the width of the road, height of the building, you don't need setbacks. That's my thinking. And then what that does is it gives us more latitude with the rear setback where you want the protection with the rail trail. Where you're going from commercial to nature versus commercial to parking and driving, or bike and driving, So I think as far as what we're trying to achieve with the setback in the front is what? I mean, that's the question you should ask.
Well, the benefit to a lesser setback too is that it will calm things down. Because you have people right on the street, it slows things down. If you're further back, it creates a much more open sort of environment where speeds aren't observed, but as you come to a section of town where you've got people right close to the street, you've got shops right there, people slow down because they have to look, there's more interaction with what's going on the road. I don't know if that's true, but that's something that I've observed, and perhaps there is a benefit to having a shorter setback.
Yeah, and much of the feedback that we've gotten has been about proximity to the historic district and the rail trail. So I think if we can increase that buffer in the rear, that's probably more important to people in this community than what happened to the front.
And to me, that's a lot of what the vision of a mixed-use community really is about. It's that streetscape and that feel of interaction. And it's the only thing that's going to turn 32 from its current transportation corridor into a more mixed-use community, I would say.
For a very short distance. For a very short distance.
For a very short distance.
We just heard consensus. We'll feel the same way.
Right.
That's great.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah, and the short distance, that's part of what makes it a village. Because it's not a village anymore if it's not too long a distance, right?
So are we also saying that we, in this, are including complete street planning?
Yeah.
What was that? I
That
couldn't
the streetscape is important, is an important part of it.
Right, but that we're recommending complete streets, which
Yeah.
use the you know,
So that's taking, we're at the setback now, between the setback and the building, and to move into the transportation bike pedestrian corridor, that's the complete street part of the puzzle.
right.
So, yeah, we're also recommending.
I'm thinking including certain things that may require a setback from your front lot line, from your physical front lot line, because to fit certain things in there, but then it being the building can be right wherever that new edge
Edge of the
is.
sidewalk.
Not necessarily your front lot line, but from whatever this
The sidewalk.
But that should be spelled out.
Yeah.
because
No, absolutely, it
otherwise-
needs to be, yeah, because it's two very different things.
Okay.
Seeing it's in some ways what you were talking about before with the, having some lots at the end that are large enough to accept possibly large enough to accept a 4 stories. If we were gonna consider that at all, we'd have to consider a campus-like setting down there where the building is surrounded and set back. And again, I don't think that is in keeping with the type of corridor that we're talking about.
Not only that, but at the very north end, on the west side of 32, we've got BOCES, which doesn't it's like 2-story buildings or big 1-story buildings. So having a 4-story building next to that would be really a stark contrast. So.
It's just my mind is still open to it. I'm not saying that that's the way I'm leaning to, but I don't want to shut it down necessarily, my thought. I don't know if we should all just shut it down, but know that we're making a decision realizing that there is that possibility of 4-story, but we know that after thinking it through, it won't work or whatever.
Okay.
I'm a big, I've always been a big proponent of 3 stories. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not pushing 4 stories necessarily, but I'm not shutting my.
Was there any reason that if someone had a compelling case to make a 4-story building, they couldn't go for a variance?
It would be self-created.
Ah, good answer, okay. All right.
Okay, do we, so we want to expand on the setback issue to include that consensus we came to right then, which was that on the street side, we could deal with 0 setback, so long as we also incorporated a complete streets scenario so that you've got a sidewalk and a bike lane included in that. And we're more concerned about having a bigger setback adjacent to the rail trail in order to have a sort of natural transition between the rail trail and whatever gets built.
Yeah, because like I think about the building where Franz Auto is, that's so far, and that's somewhere that I walk every time I drop off my car. I walk there and I walk back.
Yeah.
And it's so far off the road, if I didn't have to specifically go there, how many people are going to, in a walkable corridor, walk that far off the road just to browse in a shop and then walk back far?
Right. Plus, it's kind of scary when you cross that bridge by Trip 13, because you're in the bike lane and subject to vehicle attack.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But I
Hopefully
don't-
we can think of a way to solve that.
Yeah, I think we can. And I don't want to be rude, but I do have pneumonia, and I do have another meeting in 45 minutes, so
Okay.
I'm going to go home and lay down for a little bit and then come back.
Okay?
Bad choice of seat over here. I guess.
No, I've been on antibiotics
We're
long
going to
enough. I'm not
finish in
contagious.
10 minutes
Otherwise, I wouldn't
because
show up.
other people have to leave too. So, shall we, Bill and I will work on this.
Curse being on our committee.
I would like, if possible, and we can conclude now, if people would look at the rest of this page and see the things that we really want to stress in our concerns that we want Michael to incorporate in his.
Well, I would say I agree with the concept of street parking not being very feasible or safe unless we're talking about having, all the considerations that have been brought up already.
Okay.
The bike lanes and the speed limits. I definitely do not want chain stores or strip malls or shopping plazas, and that's kind of the other thing with the setbacks,
Okay.
because then when you set back, everybody was parking in front, and everything looks like a strip mall, and hell yes, we're a village none.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
And I would also think that we need to stress about light and noise pollution, even in that corridor. I mean, the lights need to be facing down. That's an issue for the whole corridor.
I still maintain that there's a lighting ordinance in this village, but
It
I'm being
doesn't
told
have-
there's not. I was on the board when we passed it, but I'm
I
being
think
told
it's
there's no
gone by
lighting.
the wayside. Okay.
The other part with that is to point out that the rail trail is dawn to dusk.
Yeah, but.
So you defeat the purpose of having a dawn to dusk rail trail if you're lighting it.
Right.
If
Right.
you've got lighting on it.
Right, because if you
From
walk
all the
that
parking
at
lots.
night, it's not.
So, and then it becomes more of a shady hangout place.
So I would like to make comments back so they go to him. Can we all agree that we number these bullets to make it easier? So-
Okay, all
Great.
right.
So first bullet's one, and then every bullet after
Right.
that's
Yeah.
a consecutive number. That way I don't
And,
have to rewrite
and when you talk about it, I mean, note what it's about in case we get like sidelined with the bullets.
Can
Yeah,
we,
please let me know.
Wait, before he leaves, can we congratulate him?
Yeah, congratulations, Bill. Please don't leave us till you have to.
I'm really sorry for your family.
Okay, so if board members would please email me as soon as you can about things you think are really important to stress. We will pick up again on this theme, hopefully by the time we meet again, which will be 2 weeks from tonight.
is there any chance of switching back to Tuesdays since we no longer have any planning board members? Do we know?
Well, the reason we're doing this is because we're accommodating our village board members by having you have to be at the other meeting, so I was trying to accommodate you. Also, we've run into a space thing on Tuesdays.
Okay, it's the only thing is, it's, if you're reconsiderate of us, it actually makes just a really long day because I have my day
Right.
job, I rush here,
Till 5.
and then there's a very small window
Okay.
before the other meeting.
Well,
And
let's say the
so-
24th for
But if
now.
Tuesdays don't work, then we can keep Wednesdays, hopefully we're gonna get
I
this
can't
done
make-
soon, it won't matter
I can't make
anyway.
Tuesdays.
Right,
All right.
okay.
Good night,
Thank you
everyone.
very
except
much.
for Donna.
Good
Donna,
night.
see you later, thank you.
Thank you.
This is what I read, element of first story.
I thought that was something to do with the sound system.